Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this lecture series. This is a continuation of international politics, which we have been discussing. In this lecture, we will be discussing about national power, meaning, determinants, and limitations of national power. So let's try to we will start we will start with the definition of power, the meaning of national power, the various terms associated with national power. We will try to understand the various elements of national power, and then we will discuss the limitations of national power. So let's try to understand national power in international politics. As we have stated in the earlier classes, when we state that international politics, like all politics, is a struggle for power. So power becomes a core concept. It comes to play a key role in international politics, as suggested by Hans Morkando himself when he says that international politics, like all politics, it is a struggle for power, nations coming together to secure its own national interest. And this is to be achieved with the help of power. So what is power? Power has been defined by various scholars. In this lecture, we will understand power from the view of scholars like Schwarzenperker and Charles P. Schleusser. Let's try to understand from Schwarzenperker. He says power is the capacity to impose one's will on others. Power is the capacity to impose one's will on others by reliance on effective sanctions in case of non-compliance. So it is the country has to impose its will on others by reliance on effective sanction, by reliance on even force, economic sanction or military sanction, if the other country does not comply with the wants and needs of the particular country. I'll cite an example. United States of America may come out with certain national policies or plan, but Iraq and the Middle East country may not agree with United States of America. In that case, United States of America puts sanction. United States of America wants to put forward its policy, but Russia does not go with United States of America. So United States of America end up putting sanction against Russia. This is a perfect example of the explanation given by Schwarzenperker. The next is, another definition is, power is the ability to exercise such control as to make others do. Make others do what they otherwise would not do by rewarding or promising to reward them, or by depriving or threatening to deprive them of something they value. So let's take an example. Let's say India values oil. India is an oil importing country. But if India does not go according to the will of the Middle East, let's say, then Middle East may put economic sanction in terms of oil towards India, which affects India. So India may comply with Middle East country. Let me cite an example from the Ukraine-Russia crisis. During Russia-Ukraine crisis, the metro countries like, again, United States of America tries to impose its will on Russia to stop aggression towards Ukraine, but Russia would not agree with United States of America. As a result, United States of America end up putting sanction against Russia. This is another example. You may cite an example of United States of America putting sanction against China, economic sanction against China, or towards North Korea, or towards Iraq, and sometimes even towards India during, I think it was during the 1980s or 1970s, 1980s, when India was working towards nuclearization. United States of America found out that India was working towards nuclearization, as a result of which United States of America put sanction towards India. That was history. So analyzing both this definition, we can come to conclusion that power in this context is the capacity and ability to secure a desired and intended effect or gain by means of use of force. Either it can be use of force or influence or control. So this is the definition of the term power. You may screenshot it if you want to. Otherwise, we will move on to the next point, that is national power. What is national power? Betterfold and Lincoln defined it as national power as the combination of power and capacity of a state which the state use for fulfilling its national interest and goal. It is the combination of power and capacity of a state which the state uses for fulfilling its national interest or goal. So national will use power in order to fulfill its interest. It is the combination of power and capacity of a state which the state uses for fulfilling its national interest or goals. Having understood the definition of Butterfield and Lincoln, we move on to the term power. Power is the ability, national power is the ability or capacity of a nation to secure the goal and objective of its national interest in relation with other nations. Nations will try to, it is the ability or capacity of a nation to secure its interest, to secure its goals and objectives in relation with other countries or in relation with other nations. It involves, the next line is, it involves the capacity of use of force or threat of use of force or influence over others. If persuasion does not make it, if persuasion and influence does not solve the problem, nation will even go to the extent of using force or threat of use of force for securing the goal of national interest in order to secure its national interest. So national interest, national power is the capacity or ability to control the behavior of others in accordance with one's own will. United States of America or India may impose economic sanction against Nepal if it does not go according to the will of the dictate of India, or China may impose sanction against Nepal or Bhutan if it does not go against the will of national interest. I'm putting it in a very simple term. It's a very complex thing. Nations, be it small or big, Nepal may use its own ability to control the behavior of India. Nepal being the state in between. This is China and this is India. Nepal being the buffer state between India and China, it can also play an important role and may use if it use the strategy well, it may dictate or control the behavior of both China and India to secure its own interest. So also, this is exactly done by Bhutan, or it can be done by other big countries. But in international politics, it is the big major power that plays major role. Having understood that, let's try to understand the various terms. To clear the confusion of these terms, we will try to differentiate between these various terms, the term between power and force, power and influence. First, let's try to understand the difference between power and force. What is force? Force is, in this term, it is use of physical force, use of military forces, violence in the form of police action, imprisonment or punishment or war in order, again, of course, to secure the interest, but use of physical force, violence, form of police action, imprisonment, punishment, or military force as well. Whereas power is a psychological relationship of control, backed by use of force or threat of use of force. Power need not necessarily engage in use of force. It can be through the use of soft means, soft power. It is more or less the control, psychological control, ability to control the behavior of others. And this control of behavior of others can be in the form of use of force, can be through use of force, or through use of influence and persuasion. The next is the difference between power and influence. Power involves the use of force, whereas influence does not. Power involves the use of force or threat of use of force. On the other hand, influence involves the attempt to change the behavior of others through persuasion, not by threat or force. Through persuasion, change the behavior of others through persuasion, not by threat or force. But in case of power, it can be through persuasion. It can be through the use of force. It is the legal power or political power is backed by authority or sovereignty of the state. The scope of influence is wider than the scope of power and more democratic than power. Power is power includes the use of force, whereas influence is more about persuasion, changing the behavior of others through influence, through use of persuasion. If we have understood that term, we will discuss the three dimensions of power. The three dimensions of power, I think it's here. You have military power, economic power, and psychological powers. Military power, the term military power means for key means for securing the security and territorial integrity of the nation. Why the countries are investing a lot. Military power is a key means for securing the security and territorial integrity of each nations. In order to secure the territory of the country, no nation is safe until and unless its territorial integrity is not secured. So nation will invest. Nation has been countries like even United States of America, China, India. Why do we have to invest a lot in our defense sector, in our military sector? Why countries like United States of America or China or even India has to invest a lot in its defense? Because so long as the security and territorial integrity of the nation is not safe, it cannot move forward in be it in economic factor, cultural, social development of the country. So nation is forced, compelled to invest in the defense sector, in military sector. The role and importance of a state in international relations depends upon its military power. United States of America or China or India or Russia can play a major role in international politics because it has a major strength, major sector in the field of military power. Military power is again essential for recognition as superpower. Japan and Germany, in spite of being an economic power, could not never attain the status of economic superpower, or be it the Great Britain could not attain the field of superpower because of their lack of military capability or military strength. In order to attain superpower, nation has to have military power, economic power, and psychological power. Before I move on to economic power, let me also state that Russia, in spite of being a military power, nuclear power, could not be a superpower because of its weak economic power. So what is this economic power? Economic power is constituted by ability of the nation to satisfy its own needs and to control the behavior of other states by affording or identifying access to economic goods and services. I repeat, it is constituted by the ability of a nation to satisfy its own needs. Ability of a nation to satisfy its own needs without dependent on other countries. Satisfy its own needs and to control. First, a country has to satisfy its own needs, and then the next stage is to control the behavior of other states by affording or denying access to economic goods and services. Some countries like Sri Lanka becomes so dependent on China that it has to lease out its land for, I'm told it's for 200 years, Hambantota board to China for 200 years. Some countries like South Asia countries become so dependent on China that China's economic power, Chinese economy, economic goods and services, that it cannot it cannot run the country without the Chinese help. So this is one dimension of Chinese power, economic power. Economic means of foreign policy, most vital means which a state can use for influencing the action and behavior of other states. So this economic means Chinese may be giving out loans. Chinese were giving out loans to Myanmar, to the Burmese, to the Sri Lankans. And what happened? Sri Lankan economic crisis, faced with economic crisis 2 or 3, I think it's 1 or 2 years ago. This is because of the economic sanction or because of the loan indebted. These countries are indebted to Chinese. The economic play by the Chinese has a big stake in international relations, and China is making this best use of the economic power that they are in. The next is the psychological power. Psychological power, it's more about influencing the mindset of the people. Power of opinion and image of a nation. United States of America. Let me put it here. United States of America, their image of capitalist country, or USSR trying to project communist country. China is now putting up alternate solution to the United States of America's way of power. Chinese are trying to put up. Of course, Chinese is a communist government, but Chinese and the USSR, now Russia, is trying to counter the image put up by the United States of America, the great country. China is an emerging country, and it's trying to put up an image and its own power, its own opinion and image in the world. They try to advocate the propaganda and persuasive negotiation. At one point during the Deng Xiaoping, during the Mao Zedong era, they come out with the Cultural Revolution. All these are done in order to change the mindset of the people, in order to control the mindset of the people, psychological power, increasing influence of mass media, public opinion on foreign policy. In India, we can also cite the example of India. India tried to project itself as the land of peace, where major religion like Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism originates, and all these religion talks about peace. In India, the one major factor of strength of India is India's diaspora. India's diaspora is spread across the world, be it in African countries, in American countries, in European countries, and this Indian diaspora plays a major factor in the psychological and cultural expansion of the country. You may talk of yoga, which originates in India, is also another factor. When we talk of religion, we can talk about Buddhism, we can talk about Jainism, we can talk about Hinduism that originates in India. Apart from this, India is a country that shelters various religions, be it Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism, or even atheist. India is a land of tolerance. So that's the image of India across the world. During the lecture or interview with Shashi Tharoor, I came across when he was narrating about the story of India, even in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Pakistan does not go along with Indians' policy, but Indian serials, they will die for it. They will wait for it to listen to Indian serials, which come every evening. So they will drop all their activities and they will sit around to listen to watch the Indian serial. That is the power of psychological power, the soft power of India across the continent and across the country. And this is carried forward by the Indian diaspora. The present government in United States of America, the vice president is Indian origin herself. So also in many other countries, be it in multinational corporations or even in superpower countries or great power countries, India, or small power countries, India has a role to play, and this has much to do with the psychological control over these states. All these elements, all these dimensions of power does not work in isolation. It has to work together if it is to secure the national interest. They are inseparable from each other, interdependent and inseparable. Once it is separated, the power of the nation weakens. At one point in time during the 1960s, India was considered a powerful country. But after the defeat of the Indians in the 1962 war, its moral dimension was greatly reduced. The moral of the soldiers, the moral of the people, the moral of other countries towards India was greatly reduced. The faith, the belief of other countries towards India was greatly reduced after the defeat of the Indians in the 1962 war. But this was again revived in the 1972 Indo-Pak War in Bangladesh, which is termed as liberation of Bangladesh. India played a major role, and then in the 1980s or 1990s, India came out with its nuclear policy. Slowly and steadily, its economy collapsed, in fact, in 1990s, but it revives the globalization, liberalization, and privatization of economy. Economic GDP grows, military power more or less grows, and the economic power, psychological power, soft power. Joseph Nye will use the term soft power. All this grows, and this, in fact, helped in projecting India as a powerful country in the 21st century. This is all for today. In the next session, we will be continuing with the elements of national power. I wish you the best time ahead. Thank you so much.